The last thing I heard before they put me in the sack was a child's laughter. My child. The one I never knew I had. I remember the cold. Not the cold of winter, or the cold of a hospital room, or the cold that creeps into old bones on a rainy morning. No, this was the cold of a parking lot at midnight. The asphalt still holding the day's heat in some places and surrendering to the dark in others. I remember the sack first. Rough burlap, smelling of fertilizer and dirt and something else, something metallic like old blood. They pulled it over my head before I could scream, and the world went dark and scratchy and suffocating. Then came the fists. I was 78 years old. My knees had given out a decade ago. My hands were claws of arthritis. I leaned on a cane to walk from the bedroom to the kitchen, and even that small journey left me winded. But they didn't care about any of that. The first blow caught me in the ribs. I felt something crack, a sharp, bright pain that stole my breath. The second hit my shoulder, spinning me around. I fell. The cane clattered away into the darkness. Stop, I tried to say, but my voice was a whisper, lost in the burlap. They didn't stop. Footsteps circled me. 3, maybe 4 pairs. Young men, by the sound of their grunts and laughter. They took turns. Each kick, each punch, each stomp was measured and deliberate. And above it all, I heard a voice I recognized. Not from this life. From the life I'd lived before I knew the truth. That's enough, someone said. A woman's voice. Don't kill her yet. I want her to feel it, Sophie. Even through the pain, even through the darkness, her voice cut through like a blade. Mommy, let me, a boy's voice chimed in. Young. Maybe 7 or 8. Excited, like this was a game. No, Daniel. Stay back. This isn't for children, but you said she's the bad lady. You said she took Daddy away from us. Sophie laughed. It was a soft, musical sound. The same laugh I'd heard 1,000 times at family dinners, at holiday gatherings, at Mark's hospital bedside. She didn't take him, sweetheart. She just thought she did. For 40 years, she thought she was his wife. Isn't that funny? Can I kick her? Just once, a pause. Then, just once, I felt small feet connect with my hip. Not hard, he was just a child, but the intent was there. The cruelty. I did it, Daniel squealed. I kicked the bad lady, more laughter. From Sophie. From the men. From the boy. And then the beating resumed. I don't know how long it lasted. Minutes, maybe. Hours. Time loses meaning when every breath is a prayer for unconsciousness. The last thing I remember was Sophie crouching beside me, lifting the edge of the sack just enough to see my face. You had no idea, did you? She whispered. All those years. All that money. All that love you poured into him. He never wanted any of it. He wanted me. He always wanted me. I tried to speak. Blood filled my mouth. Don't worry, she said, patting my cheek. You won't have to suffer much longer. And when you're gone, I'll finally have everything you stole from me. She stood up. Finish it, she said. And then I closed my eyes. I opened my eyes and saw his face, young, handsome, and full of lies. The light was different. Soft. Fluorescent. The kind of light that hums and flickers and smells like antiseptic. I opened my eyes. White ceiling. White sheets. The beep of a heart monitor somewhere nearby. I'm not dead, I thought. How am I not dead? I tried to sit up, and my body responded, not with the grinding ache of old bones, but with the easy flexibility of youth. My hands, when I held them in front of my face, were smooth and unlined. No age spots. No knotted knuckles. What the hell? I whispered. A nurse appeared in the doorway. She was young, everyone was young, I realized, and she smiled at me like I was a normal patient waking from a normal surgery. Mrs. Harris, you're awake. How are you feeling? I'm fine, I said. My voice was different. Younger. Stronger. Where am I? St. Mary's Hospital. You've been here every night since your husband was admitted. My husband. I looked past the nurse, toward the other bed in the room. And there he was. Mark. Not the Mark I'd buried, the withered, gray-faced man in the nursing home. This Mark was young. 34 years old, if my memory served. His face was still handsome, still unmarked by decades of bitterness and resentment. His hair was dark, his jaw was strong, and his eyes were red-rimmed and desperate. "Linda," he said, his voice cracking. "The doctor says I'll never walk again. What am I supposed to do? I won't be able to find a job." The words hit me like a physical blow. I knew this moment. I'd lived it before. In my past life, my first life, I had rushed to his side. I had held his hand. I had promised to take care of him forever. I had handed him my bank card, my savings, my entire future. And he had taken it all. Every penny. Every sacrifice. And then he had given it to her. Not this time. I sat up slowly. My body was young, no cane, no aching knees, but the weight of 43 years of betrayal pressed down on my chest like a stone. "Linda," Mark said, frowning. "Did you hear me?" I reached into the pocket of the hospital gown. My bank card was there, the one I'd brought to give him, just like before. I looked at it for a long moment. Then I put it back. "What do you think you should do?" I said. Mark blinked. "What?" I stood up. My legs didn't wobble. My back didn't ache. I walked to the window and looked out at the parking lot. "You're paralyzed, Mark," I said without turning around. "You can't work. You can't support yourself. So what do you think you should do?" I thought you'd help me. "You're my wife." I turned around. Looked him straight in the eyes. Those deep, expressive eyes that had once made me believe I was the only woman in his world. "Am I?" I said. Something flickered across his face. Guilt? Fear? I couldn't tell. But I saw it. And I knew, in that moment, that my past life hadn't been a dream. It had been a warning. The accident had happened 2 days ago. In my first life, I had been on a business trip. I finished early and decided to surprise Mark, so I didn't tell him I was coming home. When I landed, I got the call. Mark had been in a car accident. He was on his way to pick me up from the airport, they said. He was rushing to see me, and he lost control of the car. I spent 40 years believing that. 40 years of guilt. 40 years of thinking I was the reason he was in that wheelchair. The truth was simpler and uglier. Mark hadn't been on his way to the airport. He'd been in the car with Sophie. They were coming back from a weekend trip when Sophie, driving, always driving, let go of the wheel. Now, standing in the hospital room, watching Mark's face shift from confusion to something else, calculation, maybe, I realized how many clues I had missed the first time. The way Sophie had appeared at the hospital the same day as Mark, claiming to be a good Samaritan who had pulled him from the wreckage. The way she had refused to leave his side, even when the nurses asked her to. The way Mark looked at her, not with the gratitude of a man who owed his life to a stranger, but with the familiarity of a man who had known her for years. "Linda," Mark said, pulling me back to the present. "You're scaring me. Just come back to bed. We can talk about this." "Talk about what?" About the future. About how we're going to manage." I laughed. It was a short, sharp sound that made the nurse in the doorway glance over. "Manage," I repeated. "You want to talk about managing?" "Yes. The doctors say I need round-the-clock care. Physical therapy. Occupational therapy. It's going to be expensive, and you want me to pay for it." Mark's expression shifted. "I want us to pay for it. We're married. What's mine is yours, and what's yours is mine. That's how it works." How many times had I heard those words? How many times had I believed them? In my first life, I had worked 3 jobs to pay for Mark's treatments. I had drained my savings, my retirement fund, my inheritance from my parents. I had given him everything. And he had given it all to Sophie. "The bank card," Mark said, his voice taking on an edge. "You had it in your pocket. I saw it. Just give it to me and I'll handle the payments." I looked at him. Really looked at him. He was nervous. His hands were trembling. His eyes kept darting to the door, as if he was expecting someone. "Sophie." He was expecting Sophie. "Where's your savior?" I asked. Mark's face went pale. "What? The woman who saved your life? The one who pulled you from the wreckage? Where is she?" "She's probably at home." "I don't know." You're not what?" "Close. Because the way she looked at you when she brought you in, the way she held your hand, the way she whispered in your ear, that didn't look like 2 strangers who just met." Mark's mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. I walked to the door. Paused. "I'll be back," I said. But not with money. "Linda," I walked out. The waiting room was crowded. Families huddled in plastic chairs, clutching coffee cups and each other. A child cried somewhere. A television murmured the news. And there in the corner sat Sophie. She was younger than I remembered. 25 maybe. Her hair was long and dark, falling in waves over her shoulders. Her face was heart-shaped, her eyes were wide and innocent, and her lips curved in a small, worried frown. She looked like an angel. I knew better. "Sophie," she looked up. Her expression shifted from surprise to recognition to something else, something I couldn't quite name. "Linda." "Oh my God, I'm so glad you're here." She stood up, reaching for my hands. "I've been so worried about Mark. He's been asking for you." I let her take my hands. Her skin was warm. Her grip was firm. "You're the one who saved him," I said. "The Good Samaritan." Sophie's eyes filled with tears. "I just did what anyone would do. I saw the accident happen right in front of me. I couldn't just drive away." "How brave of you," she blinked. "What? Nothing. I want to thank you." "Properly." "Mark told me you pulled him out of the car. That the door was jammed and you pried it open with your bare hands." Sophie's smile flickered. "It was nothing. Adrenaline, you know, I'm sure." I looked down at her hands, the hands that had supposedly pried open a crushed car door. They were smooth. Unmarked. No scars, no bruises, no evidence of recent trauma. "That's amazing," I said. "Your hands don't look like they've been through anything." Sophie pulled her hands back. "I heal quickly, do you?" The air between us grew cold. Sophie's smile tightened at the edges. "Linda, is something wrong? You seem different." "Yes. I've died and come back to life. I've watched your son kick me to death. I've seen the truth that you spent 40 years hiding." "I'm fine," I said. "Just tired." "It's been a long couple of days." Sophie nodded, her expression softening into sympathy. "Of course. You must be exhausted. Why don't you go home and rest?" "I'll stay with Mark. Keep him company." The audacity of it. The sheer, breathtaking audacity. "You do that," I said. "Stay with my husband. We're friends now, Linda. After something like this, you bond with people. I feel like I've known you both for years. You have known him for years. Longer than me." "That's very kind of you," I said. "But I think I'll stay." Sophie's smile faltered again. Just for a moment. Just long enough for me to see the flash of annoyance in her eyes. Then it was gone. "Of course," she said. "Whatever you need." I didn't go home that night. I went to the courthouse. In my first life, I hadn't discovered the truth about my marriage until after Mark died. The lawyers told me then. Mark had filed for divorce 3 days before the accident. The papers had been signed, sealed, and nearly delivered. But the accident had delayed everything. And Mark, ever the opportunist, had used that delay to keep me in the dark. This time, I knew where to look. The records were public, buried in a dusty filing cabinet in the basement of the county courthouse, but public. I found them at 2 a.m., under the flickering light of a dying fluorescent bulb. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Filed September 12, 1983. Petitioner, Mark Harris. Respondent, Linda Harris. The date was right. The signatures were real. Mark had divorced me before the accident. Before the wheelchair. Before 40 years of lies. I photocopied every page. Then I went home. The house was empty. Mark was still in the hospital. Sophie was probably still in the waiting room, pretending to be a concerned friend. And I was alone for the first time since I'd opened my eyes in that hospital bed. I walked through the rooms slowly, touching the walls, the furniture, the photographs. In my first life, I had been thrown out of this house. Sophie's lawyers had shown up 3 days after Mark's funeral with a court order. I had stood on the sidewalk, leaning on my cane, watching strangers carry my belongings to the curb. Not this time. I went to the basement, found the loose board behind the water heater, pulled it aside. And there it was, the manila folder. Same as before. Same as in my past life. Inside, Mark's hidden bank records. His secret credit cards. his correspondence with Sophie, and a photograph. Mark, younger, healthier, holding a baby. The baby had Sophie's eyes. Daniel. I stared at the photograph for a long time. That child, that sweet-faced infant, would grow up to kick me to death in a parking lot. He would laugh while I bled. I put the photograph in my pocket. Then I went to see a lawyer. Arthur Klein was 83 years old, sharp as a tack, and retired. Or he was supposed to be. I found him in a small office above a laundromat, surrounded by stacks of paper and the ghosts of 1,000 divorces. He was thin and bald, and his hands shook when he poured his coffee, but his eyes were clear and cold and very, very awake. "You're the one who called," he said, not looking up from his desk. "Sit down." "I don't have much time," I sat. "I need a lawyer," I said. "You and everyone else." "What's your story?" I took a breath. Then I told him. Not everything. I couldn't tell him about the past life, about the death, about the second chance. He would have thought I was crazy. But I told him enough. I told him about the divorce papers Mark had filed without my knowledge, about the hidden accounts, about the affair, about the child, and I showed him the evidence. Arthur read through the documents in silence. His expression didn't change. Not when he saw the bank records. Not when he saw the photograph of Mark and the baby. When he finally looked up, his eyes were different. "Curious." "You've done your homework," he said. "Most women in your position don't find this kind of evidence until it's too late." "I almost did," I said. It almost was too late. Arthur leaned back in his chair. "The divorce papers are valid. Filed properly. Signed properly. If they'd been served, you'd have no claim to anything. But they weren't served. No. And that's where it gets interesting." He picked up the petition, turned it over in his hands. "Your husband filed for divorce, but he never told you. He never gave you the papers. He let you continue believing you were married while he hid assets and supported another woman. That's fraud, isn't it?" Arthur smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was the smile of a predator who just caught a scent. "That's exactly what it is. I didn't go back to the hospital for 3 days. Mark called 17 times. I let them all go to voicemail. Sophie called 2, sweet, concerned messages about how worried Mark was, how he needed me, how I was being so unfair. I saved every message. On the 4th day, Mark posted on social media. "After my accident, my wife abandoned me. I'm paralyzed. I can't work. I have nothing. Please keep me in your prayers." The photo showed him in his hospital bed, looking pale and pitiful. What it didn't show was Sophie, sitting just out of frame, holding his hand. The comments poured in. "That's horrible. What kind of woman abandons her husband? Praying for you, Mark. Stay strong. Your wife should be ashamed of herself." I didn't respond. "Not yet." The next day, he posted again. "Update, my wife has frozen our joint accounts. I can't pay for my treatments. I don't know what to do." More outrage. More sympathy. A few people started tagging me, demanding answers. I stayed silent. On the 3rd day, he posted a photo of himself in his wheelchair, the same photo he'd used in my past life. The one with Sophie's reflection, visible in the shiny metal armrest. This time, I didn't let it slide. I commented, "Nice photo, Mark. Who's the woman kissing you in the reflection?" The internet exploded. Within hours, people had zoomed in on the image, enhanced it, shared it. Sophie's face was unmistakable, leaning in, lips pressed to Mark's cheek, her hand on his shoulder. "Isn't that the woman who saved him?" someone asked. "Wait, he's been cheating this whole time." And she abandoned him. Mark scrambled to do damage control. He deleted the photo. He posted a rambling explanation, claiming Sophie was just a friend who was helping him recover. But the damage was done. A few hours later, an anonymous account posted screenshots of Mark's text messages with Sophie. Messages I'd retrieved from his old phone. Messages like, "Linda's working late again. Come over, I love you, not her. You know that, once I get the money from her, we're gone." The comments turned vicious. "You're disgusting. Your wife worked 3 jobs to support you, and this is how you repay her. I hope she takes everything." Mark called me that night. I let it ring. He called 17 more times. I didn't answer. Finally, he sent a text. "Linda, please. We can work this out. I'll do anything. Just stop posting things online." I typed back, "You had 40 years to work things out. You chose Sophie. Live with it." Then I blocked his number. Sophie showed up at my door the next morning. She didn't knock. She didn't ring the bell. She just walked in. Because she'd had a key, of course she'd had a key. Mark had given her a key years ago. "Linda," she said, her voice dripping with false concern. "We need to talk." I was sitting at the kitchen table, drinking coffee. I didn't stand up. "Get out of my house." Sophie's smile flickered. "Your house?" "Linda, this is Mark's house. Mark's and mine. I'm just what? The woman who paid for it. The woman who worked 3 jobs while your boyfriend sat in a wheelchair and drained our bank account." Sophie's face hardened. The sweetness drained away, replaced by something cold and ugly. "Fine," she said. "You want to do this the hard way. Let's do it the hard way." She walked to the table. Sat down across from me. "Mark never loved you," she said. "Not for 1 second. He married you because you had a good job and no family to interfere. You were an ATM with legs, Linda. That's all." I didn't flinch. I'd heard these words before, in a parking lot in the dark, with blood in my mouth. "And you," I said. "What were you?" "The mistress who couldn't keep her hands on the wheel." Sophie's eyes widened. "I saw the dashcam footage," I said. "I know you were driving. I know you let go of the wheel. I know you caused the accident. You can't prove that. I already have." Sophie went pale. "You're lying." "I don't lie, Sophie. That's your thing." I slid a folder across the table. Inside, copies of the traffic camera footage, the accident report, and the statement from the mechanic who'd recovered the memory card. Sophie stared at the folder. Her hands were shaking. "You think this changes anything?" she whispered. "Mark will never leave me. He loves me. He's always loved me. Then why did he marry me? Because you had money. Because you were easy. Because you were so desperate for someone to love you that you would have done anything for him." I stood up. Walked to the door. Opened it. "Get out," I said. Sophie didn't move. "You think you've won. You haven't won anything. Mark and I have been together since we were kids. We have a son together. A son you helped raise. By the way, every check Mark wrote for Daniel's school came from your account. I know, you know, I know everything, Sophie. I know about the affair. I know about the child. I know about the divorce papers Mark filed in 1983. I know about the will he planned to leave, the one you forged to cut me out." Sophie stood up slowly. Her face was white. "How?" she whispered. I looked at her, this woman who had destroyed my life, who had laughed while I died, who had raised a son to be a killer. "Because I've done this before," I said. "And I remember everything. I found Daniel on a Tuesday. In my past life, I hadn't known he existed until the very end. Sophie had kept him hidden, protected, raised in secret, while I worked myself to the bone for a man who was never really mine. But now I knew where to look. The house was in the suburbs, a modest ranch with a swing set in the backyard and a tricycle on the front porch. It was the kind of house I would have loved to raise children in, back when I still thought I could have them. I parked across the street and watched. A nanny came out first, a young woman with a bored expression and earbuds in her ears. She sat on the porch steps and scrolled through her phone. Then Daniel came out. He was 4 years old, small for his age, with dark hair and dark eyes and a face that was already too sharp, too knowing. He ran to the swing set and climbed on, pumping his legs furiously. I got out of the car. The nanny looked up as I approached. "Can I help you? I'm a friend of the family," I said. I just wanted to say hello to Daniel. The nanny frowned. "Mrs. Tran didn't mention any visitors. She doesn't know I'm here. It's a surprise." Daniel stopped swinging. He looked at me with those dark, flat eyes that reminded me too much of Sophie. "Who are you?" he asked. "I'm Linda." He tilted his head. "Are you my daddy's wife?" The nanny shifted uncomfortably. "Daniel, maybe we should go inside. My daddy says he has a wife, but he doesn't love her. He says she's just for money." I crouched down so I was at his eye level. "Yes," I said quietly. "I'm the money wife." Daniel smiled. It was a cold, knowing smile, too old for his face, too sharp for a child. My daddy says you're stupid, he said. He says you'll give him anything he wants because you feel guilty. But you shouldn't feel guilty. He wasn't coming to get you. He was with my mommy. The nanny stood up. Daniel, that's enough. My mommy says you're ugly. Daniel continued, ignoring her. She says you're old and ugly, and that's why my daddy doesn't love you. I stayed crouched. Kept my face calm. Does your mommy also tell you to hurt people? I asked. Daniel's smile faltered. What? People who take what's yours? Does she tell you to hurt them? The nanny finally intervened. Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. I stood up. Looked down at Daniel, this child who would grow up to kick me to death, who would laugh while I bled. You're going to have a choice someday, I said. You can be like your mother, or you can be better. I hope you choose better. Daniel's face twisted. I hate you, he spat. I know. I walked back to my car. Behind me, I heard Daniel screaming. The nanny trying to calm him. The slam of a door. I didn't look back. Chapter 9, the lawsuit mini-hook he thought he could hide. He forgot I knew all his secrets. Arthur filed the lawsuit on a Friday. The charges were simple: fraud, concealment of assets, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. But the evidence behind them was anything but simple. Bank records showing Mark had transferred over $200,000 to Sophie over 6 years. Property records showing he'd bought her the house in the suburbs. School records showing he'd enrolled Daniel in a private preschool, paid for with money from our joint account. And the dashcam footage. Arthur wanted to keep that as a surprise. Let them think they have a chance, he said. Then we hit them with the footage. The first hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks out. In the meantime, I prepared. I went through every box in the basement, every file in Mark's office, every locked drawer he thought I didn't know about. I found more evidence: credit card statements, hotel receipts, love letters Mark had written to Sophie and never sent. I found a letter dated 1982, a year before the divorce. Sophie, I can't wait any longer. I'm going to divorce Linda. I don't care what it costs. I want to be with you. I want to marry you. I want to watch our children grow up. Just give me a little more time to figure out the money situation. A little more time. He'd had 43 years. I put the letter in the folder and kept digging. The night before the hearing, Arthur called me. Linda, you need to see this. I drove to his office. It was after midnight, but the lights were on. Arthur was sitting at his desk, staring at his computer screen. What is it? The dashcam footage. The full version. He turned the screen toward me. Watch. I sat down. Watched. The footage was grainy, shot from inside the car. Mark was in the passenger seat. Sophie was driving. I've officially divorced Linda, Mark said. After the party tonight, let's go get our marriage license. Sophie laughed. No rush. Better wait until you've transferred all your assets into your name. If your ex-wife finds out, it might get messy. You always say that, Mark said. I gave you a car. I gave you all the savings Linda entrusted to me. You blew it all on bad investments. Every time you promise we'll get married as soon as possible. You're not planning to fool me again, are you? How could I? Sophie said sweetly. And then she leaned over and kissed him. The car swerved. Sophie's hands left the wheel. She didn't try to correct. She didn't brake. She didn't do anything except kiss him and wait. Sophie, Mark shouted. The road, but it was too late. The car slammed into a tree. The footage went dark. I sat in silence for a long time. She let go, I said finally. She intentionally let go of the wheel. Arthur nodded. The accident reconstruction, experts agree. There's no evidence of braking or evasive maneuvers. She had her hands off the wheel for a full 3 seconds before impact. She wanted him paralyzed or dead. Either way, she wanted him dependent. On her. On you. On anyone who would pay. I thought about Mark, lying in that hospital bed, believing Sophie had saved him. Believing she loved him. Believing she was the only one who truly cared. He had no idea she was the one who put him there. Can we prove it was intentional? I asked. Arthur shook his head. Probably not. But we don't need to. All we need to prove is that Mark and Sophie were having an affair before the divorce was filed. That's enough to challenge the divorce settlement. Enough to get you your share of the assets. not the house. The house is in both your names. That's community property. Even if the divorce is valid, you're entitled to half. Half. It wasn't everything, but it was more than I'd had in my past life. Do it, I said. Take them to court. The hearing was packed. Mark was there in his wheelchair, looking pale and nervous. Sophie sat beside him, holding his hand, wearing a black dress and an expression of wounded innocence. Mark's parents were there too, his mother with her sharp eyes and sharper tongue, his father with his silent disapproval. They glared at me as I walked in. I didn't glare back. I didn't need to. Arthur was already at the defense table, arranging his files. He looked calm, almost bored. I knew that look. It meant he was about to destroy someone. All rise, the judge entered. She was a woman in her 60s, with gray hair and a face that had seen everything. Judge Margaret Holloway. Known for being fair, but not soft. Mr. Klein, she said. You may present your case. Arthur stood up slowly. Adjusted his glasses. Your Honor, he said, we are here to challenge the validity of a divorce petition filed by Mark Harris on September 12, 1983. A petition that was never served to my client, Linda Harris, and that Mr. Harris actively concealed for over 6 years. Mark's lawyer, a young man in an expensive suit, stood up. Your Honor, the divorce was filed properly and legally. The fact that it wasn't served is irrelevant. It's entirely relevant, Arthur interrupted. Mr. Harris allowed my client to believe she was his wife for 6 years after filing for divorce. During that time, she worked 3 jobs, paid his medical bills, and supported him financially, all while he was hiding assets and conducting an affair with another woman. The gallery murmured. Judge Holloway raised a hand. Quiet, she looked at Arthur. What evidence do you have of this affair? Arthur turned to me. I stood up, walked to the front of the courtroom, and handed the judge a folder. Inside, the bank records, the property records, the love letters, and the dashcam footage. This footage, Arthur said, was recovered from Mr. Harris's vehicle. It shows the accident that left him paralyzed. It also shows that the driver, Sophie Tran, was not a good Samaritan but his mistress, and that she deliberately let go of the wheel. The courtroom went silent. Judge Holloway watched the footage on her laptop. Her expression didn't change. When it was over, she looked up. Ms. Tran, she said. Would you like to explain this? Sophie stood up. Her face was white. I didn't mean to. The car swerved. The car swerved because you took your hands off the wheel, Arthur said. For 3 full seconds. While you were kissing a married man. I didn't. You caused the accident that paralyzed Mark Harris. You concealed your relationship with him from his wife. You accepted money from her, money that should have gone to their joint expenses, and used it to support yourself and your child. Sophie's mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. Mark's lawyer tried to intervene. Your Honor, this is. Sit down, Judge Holloway said. He sat. The judge looked at me. Mrs. Harris, what are you asking for? I stood up. My legs were steady. My voice was steady. I'm asking for what's mine, I said. Half of the marital assets. The house. And a declaration that the divorce petition filed in 1983 is invalid due to fraud and concealment. Judge Holloway nodded. Then she looked at Mark. Mr. Harris, she said, do you have anything to say for yourself? Mark's face was gray. His hands were shaking. I made mistakes, he said. But I loved Linda. I did. In my own way, I laughed. I couldn't help it. You loved me so much that you let me blame myself for your accident for 40 years. You loved me so much that you gave my money to another woman. You loved me so much that you let her raise a son who would grow up to. I stopped. Took a breath. Your Honor, I said, I just want what I'm owed. Judge Holloway was quiet for a long moment. Then she picked up her gavel. I've seen a lot of cases in my 30 years on the bench, she said. But this one takes the cake. She looked at Mark. Mr. Harris, you filed for divorce in 1983. You never served your wife. You never told her. You let her believe she was still married while you hid assets, conducted an affair, and fathered a child with another woman. That is fraud. That is cruelty. And I will not allow it to stand. She looked at Sophie. MS. Tran, you caused an accident that left a man paralyzed. Whether it was intentional or not, the evidence is clear. You were driving, you were distracted, and you took your hands off the wheel. That is negligence. That is criminal. She looked at me. Mrs. Harris, the divorce petition filed in 1983 is hereby declared invalid. You are legally married to Mark Harris. And as his wife, you are entitled to half of all marital assets, including the house, the bank accounts, and any property purchased with marital funds. Mark's face went white. Sophie started crying. Furthermore, Judge Holloway continued, I am referring the matter of the accident to the district attorney's office for potential criminal charges against MS. Tran, Sophie's crying turned to screaming. You can't do this, she shrieked. You can't, bailiff, Judge Holloway said calmly, remove MS. Tran from my courtroom, the verdict made the news. Not the local news, the national news. A paralyzed man who'd faked a marriage for 6 years. A mistress who'd caused the accident that crippled him. A wife who'd been betrayed and used and discarded. The public turned on Mark and Sophie with a fury I hadn't expected. Reporters camped outside the hospital. Sophie's face was everywhere, on every channel, every website, every front page. Her house in the suburbs was picketed. Her son was removed from her custody by Child Protective Services. Mark tried to call me. Again and again. I didn't answer. He sent letters. Long, rambling apologies. Pleas for forgiveness. Promises to make things right. I burned everyone. Okay, if you've enjoyed walking this path of revenge and rebirth with Reborn English drama, please show some love by hitting that like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support is the fuel that keeps these stories alive, and it would mean the world to me to have you here when we return next stories. 1 month later, I was in the garden behind the house, my house now, half of it anyway, when I saw the wheelchair come up the driveway. Mark looked worse than I remembered. Thinner, paler. His hands were wrapped around the wheels, pushing himself up the slope with visible effort. Linda, he said when he saw me. Please. Just give me 5 minutes. I didn't invite him in. I didn't offer him water or a seat or any of the courtesies I'd extended for 43 years. Say what you came to say, I said. Mark took a breath. His eyes were red. I'm sorry, he said. I know that doesn't mean anything. I know I hurt you. I know I used you. I know I lied to you every day for 6 years. 43, I corrected. What, 43 years? Not 6. In my past life, you lied to me for 43 years. You let me blame myself for your accident. You let me work myself to the bone. You let me die alone in a parking lot at the hands of your son. Mark's face crumpled. That wasn't I didn't, you didn't know. You didn't mean it. You would have made it right if you'd had the chance. I shook my head. I've heard it all before, Mark. From you. From Sophie. From everyone who ever used me and threw me away. Linda, I don't hate you, I said. That's the strange part. I thought I would. I thought I'd spend the rest of my life hating you. But I don't. Mark's eyes lit up with hope. I don't hate you, I continued. I just don't care about you anymore. You're nothing to me. Less than nothing. You're a stranger I used to know. Please, goodbye, Mark. I turned and walked back into the house. Behind me, I heard him call my name. Once. Twice. 3 times. Then I heard the wheels of his chair turn, slow and heavy, as he rolled back down the driveway. I closed the door. I thought that was the end. It wasn't. Mark asked to meet me at a cafe downtown. He said it was about the house, about the final paperwork. Arthur thought it was a good idea. A chance to close things out cleanly. I should have known better. He was already there when I arrived, sitting in his wheelchair at a corner table. He looked worse than the last time I'd seen him, thinner, paler, his hands shaking as he reached for his coffee. Linda, he said when he saw me. Thank you for coming. I sat down across from him. Didn't order anything. What do you want, Mark? He took a breath. Exhaled. His eyes were red-rimmed, wet. I had a dream, he said. A nightmare. About the future. About what happens to us I went very still. In the dream, he continued, I died. And I left everything to Sophie. And you. You suffered. You lost everything. And then his voice cracked. And then you died too. Because of Daniel, the cafe seemed very loud suddenly. The hiss of the espresso machine. The clink of cups. A woman laughing at the counter. You were reborn too, Mark said. It wasn't a question. I didn't answer. The will, he said desperately. The will was forged. Sophie altered it. I originally meant to divide the assets fairly between you. She changed it. I swear, Linda, I didn't. What are you trying to prove? I cut him off. That you weren't that heartless. That I should give you credit for some decency. We were married for 6 years, he said. We may not have been madly in love, but we had feelings. I'm only human. It's not like I never cared about you. I laughed. It was bitter and sharp. You cared about me so much that you let me blame myself for your accident. You cared about me so much that you let me work myself to the bone while you gave my money to another woman. You cared about me so much that you let Sophie turn your son into a monster who grew up to beat me to death. Mark flinched like I'd slapped him. I didn't know about that, he whispered. In my dream, I didn't know. You knew enough. You knew Sophie was dangerous. You knew she was using you. And you didn't care because she made you feel loved. Because she gave you a child. Because I was just the woman who paid the bills. Mark opened his mouth to respond. The door of the cafe burst open. A familiar voice, childish, sharp, cruel, rang out across the room. Pretty boy. You promised you'd buy me an even bigger transformer. I looked up. Daniel stood in the doorway, pointing at Mark. Behind him, Sophie had her arms wrapped around a man at least 10 years older than her, a man who was definitely not Mark. Sophie froze when she saw us. Her face went white, then red, then white again. What the hell are you doing here, Mark? She demanded. The man beside her frowned. Sophie, who's this guy? He's my uncle, Sophie said quickly. Just a family friend. Don't worry about it, but Mark wasn't playing along this time. Your uncle, he said, his voice rising. Your uncle is the one who got crippled just so he could be with you. Your uncle is the one who gave you every penny he had so you wouldn't suffer. Your uncle is the one you tricked into having a child with you. Sophie lunged for him. Shut up. Shut your mouth. She tried to cover his mouth, but Mark shoved her away. Hard. She stumbled back, nearly falling. I've been slaving away for you my entire life, Mark shouted, pointing at the man beside her. And now you found yourself a new uncle. The man's expression shifted. Cold. Calculating. So this kid isn't even mine, he said, looking at Daniel. Sophie tried to explain. Please let me. She didn't get to finish. The man slapped her across the face, hard enough to leave a mark. You tried to con me, he said. Just wait. I'm not letting this go. He walked out. Sophie stood there, holding her cheek, shaking with fury. Then she turned on Mark. This is all your fault, she hissed. You ruined everything. Why don't you just die? She kicked his wheelchair. Hard. Mark toppled backward, crashing to the floor. He tried to pull himself up, but Sophie grabbed his collar, her face twisted with rage. And Daniel, their son, ran over and started kicking his own father. Let go of my mom, the boy screamed. This is all your fault. You had to go blab and ruin everything. My transformer is gone. You owe me a new transformer. The cafe fell silent. Everyone was staring. The barista. The customers. The woman who'd been laughing at the counter. I stood up. I looked at Mark, sprawled on the floor, being kicked by his son and his mistress, and I felt nothing. No pity. No satisfaction. Just a vast, empty calm. I walked out of the cafe. Behind me, I heard Sophie screaming. Mark pleading. Daniel laughing. I didn't look back. The footage from the cafe went viral. Someone uploaded it to social media. Within hours, it had millions of views. Sophie's face was everywhere. Mark's face was everywhere. The world watched as a woman kicked a paralyzed man out of his wheelchair, and her 4-year-old son joined in. The man Sophie had been with, the new uncle, had connections. Deep ones. He didn't just dump Sophie. He destroyed her. Every financial record. Every text message. Every lie she'd ever told. He leaked it all. Sophie was broke within a week. Evicted within a month. Daniel was removed from her custody by CPS and placed with Mark's parents. The same parents who had abandoned Mark when he needed them most. Mark tried to make things right. He called me. He wrote letters. He even showed up at my door once, crying, begging me to take him back. I didn't answer. 3 months later, I got the news from Arthur. Sophie had moved back in with Mark, not because she loved him, but because she had nowhere else to go. The two of them lived in a tiny apartment, fighting constantly, barely able to afford food. One night, after a particularly vicious argument, Mark dressed in his best clothes, the suit he'd worn to our wedding, and turned on the gas. He sealed the windows. The doors. Sophie was asleep on the couch. Daniel was in the bedroom. They never woke up. I heard the news while having dinner with my parents. They were old now, older than I remembered, older than they should have been. But they were alive. Healthy. Happy. Because I'd protected them this time. I'd kept them away from Mark. Away from Sophie. Away from the slow, grinding destruction that had killed them in my past life. I picked up my wine glass. To the dead, I said quietly. My father looked at me. Linda, I poured the wine onto the floor, a small offering, a small goodbye. To the living, I said, filling my glass again. I drank. And then I smiled, a real smile, the first one in 2 lives. 6 months later, I sold the house. Not to Sophie, she was dead, but to a young couple with twin babies and too much hope. I used the money to start a small foundation. A shelter for women who'd been trapped in bad marriages, who'd been used and discarded by the people they loved. The first resident moved in on a Tuesday. Her name was Maria. She was 53 years old. Her husband had taken everything. I sat with her in the garden behind the shelter. The sun was warm. The flowers were blooming. I don't know how to start over, Maria whispered. I took her hand. Yes, you do, I said. You just did, 5 years later. I was in the garden again, the garden behind the shelter, when I heard footsteps. A young woman stood at the gate. She was maybe 30, with dark hair and dark eyes, and a face that looked like it had been crying. Are you Linda? She asked. I am, she walked closer. Held out her hand. My name is Anna, she said. I read about your story. About what you went through. About what you built. I shook her hand. It's nice to meet you, Anna. She looked around the garden, at the flowers, at the benches, at the women sitting in small groups, talking and laughing. I don't have anywhere else to go, she said quietly. My husband. He took everything. The house. The money. The kids. I have nothing. I looked at her, this woman who had been broken and discarded, just like I had been. You have yourself, I said. That's enough, she started to cry. I put my arm around her shoulders and led her into the garden. If you've enjoyed walking this path of revenge and rebirth with Reborn English drama, please show some love by hitting that like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support is the fuel that keeps these stories alive, and it would mean the world to me to have you here when we return next stories. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next day.